Will black women stop MAGA and Trump and be the ones to save America in 2024? Stay tuned right after this. Hey y'all, what's up? This is attorney Chloe Corbett, aka the Duchess of Justice. I am one half of the Defiant Lawyers, where we provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you to defy this unjust legal system and nullify systemic racism. So to give a little context for this video, I am going to be delving into the pivotal role that black women played in 2020 in the battle against MAGA and Trump. And the question is, will black women be the group to again stop MAGA and Trump in 2024 in November? So discover how their strength, resilience, and unwavering resolve are shaping the entire political landscape and paving the way for a new era of progress. So let's get right into it. So for those of you all who followed the 2020 election, especially the Democratic primaries, there was a lot of talk about the importance of black women in that first the primary election on the Democratic side and then the general election in late 2020. And I would assert that if it were not for black women, Biden would not be president today because they provided him nearly unwavering support, especially in the state of South Carolina during the Democratic primary election, in a field where it really looked like Biden would not end up being the top nominee. I don't know if you all remember, those of you all who followed that primary cycle, but there were a lot of ups and downs with the Democrats, and Biden was not always the top contender for the person who would take the nomination. But the tide turned after that South Carolina landslide that he received, especially because of black women. So this is an article from the Tennessean, and this author writes that in early 2021, just months after black women showed up in record numbers to elect Joe Biden, a leader from our own community stepped up and announced that she was running for Congress to continue the fight for real change. So the Tennessean is referring to Odessa Kelly, who is a black, gay, progressive woman. And so she's comparing the numbers that, or this author is comparing the numbers that black women put up for Joe Biden to see whether or not it will spread to other Democrats and whether it did back in 2020. And this author is asserting that Republicans are afraid of black women who vote. She wrote, in the wake of the 2020 election, Republicans like Governor Bill Lee, House Speaker Cameron Sexton, and Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson got scared about what a future with black women deciding elections would look like. And because it was a year when the Republican leadership controlled our entire state government during the once-in-a-decade redistricting process, they intentionally gerrymandered our state to divide Nashville and our voices between 4 congressional districts. So what happened here after the 2020 election in Tennessee, you can see it in various states. Gerrymandering is huge here in Texas. We know that gerrymandering occurred in other states like Alabama and across the country. And why? It's because Republicans do not want united black people to vote and stop MAGA from trying to take over our country and turn our country into a fascist society. And so the best way to do that is to try to gerrymander, which is to put all of these discombobulated districts together in order to give MAGA and the Republicans an advantage with elections. Let's continue our analysis of how black women really led to the election of Joe Biden back in 2020 and whether or not that is a predictor of whether they will help Biden be elected and stop MAGA and Trump in 2024. So I'm looking at an article from USA Today, how black women worked to secure Joe Biden's election as president. And this author writes that about 90% of black women voted for President Joe Biden over Donald Trump in the 2020 election. 90%. Okay. So that makes black women one of the Democrats' most loyal bloc. We're more loyal to the Democrats than black men, than other minorities, obviously than Caucasians. We are their most loyal bloc. And for the past 5 presidential cycles, black women have shown up to the polls at higher rates than any other group. According to this article, in 2020, their nationwide voter mobilization efforts led to the historic turnout that secured Biden's victory. So if you look back in history or look back at these voter organizations, you'll see that black women are there. We are big on making sure that people are mobilized to vote, making sure that they have access to the polls, that they are educated about the polls. I mean, the biggest and best example is Stacey Abrams and the voter mobilization that she was able to do in her state, which was absolutely amazing and almost led to her being governor. I hope she comes back into politics and does not stop, because I really believe that she has something to say. She has a passion for our people, and obviously to stop MAGA and stop Trump. Not only are black women the backbone of American democracy, as this article says, I agree with that. And they say that it's because it's rooted in a history of racial oppression and gendered disenfranchisement. We know that. We've seen what this country did to black people, and in this case, specifically black women, the racial oppression that we suffered during slavery, after slavery, Jim Crow, during the mid 1900s, all of that. Okay. So not only were we racially oppressed, but then you talk about the gender misogyny and disenfranchisement that came on top of us being black. We've had to overcome a lot. And that's why I believe black women, we're known for being strong. We are strong, passionate, and it's because we've had to be. Black women have been the spearhead of social justice movements throughout American history. Although largely ignored in history books until the late 20th century, black women were a driving force in the abolitionist movement in the mid 1800s. Let's look into that. This is from libertarianism.org. Although I don't prescribe to libertarianism, I do think that they have a good article about the contributions that black women made to ending slavery and the abolitionist movement. So I want to go through a couple. They write in September 1832, free black domestic Maria W. Stewart became the first American woman to address a public audience of women and men. She spoke out against slavery. She wrote pamphlets and speeches for William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator until she retired in 1833. There was another black woman, Mary Prince, who wrote a book, The History of Mary Prince, a West Indian slave, which exposed the horrors of the Caribbean slave trade. She was the first woman to present an anti-slavery petition to Parliament. And we know that there were other black women out as well who were essential and crucial to making sure that slavery was ended and the atrocities and horrors of slavery were presented to the public and internationally as well. We know that black women also led the fight to pass the Voting Rights Act in 1965, which helped to abolish the tactics of voter suppression that targeted black Americans. I mean, there are so many black civil rights leaders, black female civil rights leaders, and justice leaders as well. And again, they stood up in 2020 to stop Trump being reelected. And I believe that we're going to stand up in 2024 to stop Trump being elected again. Okay. For example, since the 1940s, after Reese Taylor spoke out against the white man who kidnapped and sexually assaulted her, black women have also led the charge in addressing sexual violence, paving the way for the Me Too movement. Some of you all may not know, but a black woman started the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement was started by Tarana Burke, who is a social activist and community organizer. She began using the phrase Me Too in 2006 on her MySpace to promote, quote, empowerment through empathy among women of color who have been sexually abused. So she started that for women of color who have been sexually abused. And then obviously, as we know, we saw the Me Too movement just bloom and skyrocket and really spread to Hollywood, most especially, and other male-dominated industries, and really became an actual phenomenon of a movement. I believe it really changed American society as well. So that was started by black women. So in all of these various aspects and industries, especially as regards to justice movements, civil rights, social justice, black women have been at the forefront. Okay. We are the most consistent voters in America. Again, we are organized. A lot of black women are religious, attend churches, contribute to churches, are in organizations that help with, society and promoting social justice. Okay. So again, that led to a record number of black American voters in the 2020 election. And according to an African diaspora historian at the University of South Carolina, Elena Morgan, she says, quote, black women are acting at the intersection of so many different types of injustices that particularly affect them and their children. We never had the opportunity to be anything else but forward-thinking survivors, one woman said. If we were not, we could die. Our families could die. Our children could die. Part of the culture of how we show up in the world is in our response to our history. Yes, I agree with that. As I was going through before, our history really drives our activism as black women. Okay? That's why we are successful organizers. Brittany Smalls, a Black Voters Matters Pennsylvania state coordinator, said, quote, black women are nurturers. We've been nurturers since slavery. We nurtured other children that did not belong to us. It's tiring, but I get my strength when I think about my family members, when I think about my great-grandmother who actually picked cotton. Since March in 2020, Black Voters Matter Fund partnered with more than 600 grassroots organizations to get out the vote among the black community in swing states and vulnerable counties, providing supplies, funding, and strategic guidance. So that leads me into my question that I started this video with. Will black women be the group of people to save America and stop MAGA and Trump? I think the answer is yes. But we have to do what we did in 2020. We have to get out the vote. We have to make sure that we mobilize people to vote, that we provide supplies, funding, and strategic guidance, okay? And that we continue to be at the forefront of the organizational foundation that is needed to make sure and to circumvent what MAGA and Republicans are trying to do with stopping black people, black women from voting because they're scared of us. They know that if we come out like we did in 2020, we really could stop Trump from being elected in 2024. And that's why we had that crazy interaction when he went down, I think it was to Atlanta. My dad made a video about this, so I encourage you to go back and look at that video where he analyzed Trump's interaction with those black workers at a Chick-fil-A, I think it was, because they know that they need black people. And according to reports that I've read, the Trump campaign is relying on black men, a section of black men, to come over to them. And that's something too. There's a divide between black women and black men in terms of politics. There's a growing divide because black women consistently have voted for Democrats and been, as we saw, their most loyal voting bloc. But black men more and more are leaning toward Trump, toward MAGA, and that's really causing division in our community. That's a conversation that I want to have for another day. I'm going to analyze this growing political divide between black women and black men. I mean, we saw back in 2020, the 2020 cycle, when Stacey Abrams was running for office, and black men did not show up for her. Why is that? But that's another conversation for another day. So stay tuned. I will be making a video about that. So let's turn to 2024. What are the issues that black women identify as their top issues ahead of the November 2024 election? So from The Hill, they report that a new poll found that black women are increasingly concerned about the direction of the country and the rising cost of living ahead of November's election. Okay. The new poll, conducted by HIT Strategies on behalf of Higher Heights Leadership Fund, which is a national organization dedicated to advancing black women's political power, found that though 76% of black women feel their vote is powerful, 26% believe that their power is decreasing as the November election approaches. So let's talk about this. So according to this poll, many black women are concerned about the direction of the country. What will happen to our country if Trump is reelected? What will Trump do to our institutions? And even though we know that the institutions need to be changed because of institutional racism, systemic racism, we're doing the work to change them. But he is going to make that institutional racism even worse and destroy some of the institutions that we do need that helped us overcome slavery and discrimination when we were even more disenfranchised. Because in a lot of cases, such as the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, if the federal government had not stepped in, the state and state powers would continue to go unchecked. I mean, we had a literal civil war in which southern states tried to create their own country just so that they can keep slavery. And I know a lot of people try to say, no, it was about, states' rights and keeping their culture. And no, it was about slavery. It was about wanting to continue to enslave African Americans for profit. That's what it was about. And if the federal government had not stepped in at that point and said, no, we are keeping this nation together. If the federal government had not stepped in 100 years later in the 1960s for the landmark legislation that continues to offer protections today, even though I have to warn you all, these Trump appointed judges and even before then have continued to whittle away at the protections of the Civil Rights Act and the civil rights protections that we received in the mid 1960s. They're making it a lot more difficult to prove racial discrimination. You now have to prove intent. A lot of these cases are kicked out as soon as you file them, before the case even really begins. So there has been a concerted effort to whittle away the protections that are needed to make sure that African Americans are treated equally by corporations, by businesses, by state governments, by the police. Those protections are slowly going away. So that is why voting matters. And I believe black women, we're so in tune to this. That's why this poll showed that we're increasingly concerned about the direction of the country. Okay. According to this poll, 58% of black women identify the rising cost of living as the number one issue affecting the country. And then public safety, including gun violence. So one organizer said, quote, many of us are always talking to black women about democracy and voting rights, which I still think we lead with, but I think we need to be talking to black women more and more about the economy and the cost of living. I think it's both. Black women, we know The economy is important to making sure that our families have economic power, are able to be fed, are able to take care of ourselves. But it goes hand in hand with voting and keeping our democracy in place as much as possible, even though we are a democratic republic, but making sure that our systems are not changed. Okay. Another big issue, according to this poll, is abortion. They say that abortion is a galvanizing issue for Black women. Over 40% of Black women said they are more likely to vote for a candidate who is pro-reproductive freedom, and that number held across age, education, and political party. Though 58% of Black women also feel underrepresented in politics, most are still optimistic about the representational power they do have. Nearly 81% of Black women voters believe that Black women elected officials have the power to effect change in their communities. I love that. Okay. Just 10 years ago, from 2024, there were only 18 Black women serving in Congress. Today, there are 31. 10 years ago, only 2 Black women were serving as mayors. Today, there are 8. There were only 2 statewide elected Black women, and a decade later, there are 12. So we are making progress, but there's a lot more progress that still needs to be made and change that needs to come. And it starts with stopping Trump and MAGA in 2024. We must stop Trump in 2024. Okay? We must. Lastly, let's look at some statistics from Higher Heights for America, which is a PAC, which is the only political action committee, according to its website, exclusively dedicated to electing more progressive Black women at the federal and statewide levels and as mayors in the 100 most populated U.S. cities. They have some interesting statistics on their website. They say that 16 million Black women are eligible to vote and 67% are registered. Black women made up 17% of voters who cast their ballots in the 2017 special election in Alabama, even though they account for less than 14% of the state's population. 94% of Black women supported Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election. 96% of Black women voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. And 90%, as we discussed earlier, of Black women voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2020. So the question is, will that percentage remain the same in 2024? I think so. I think that the cost or the concern about our democracy is a big concern for Black women, as was shown. And I think the reproductive rights issue will be a big concern, not only for Black women, but women in general. And it really may pull Democrats over the hump in November. They say that Black women are increasingly running and winning. Obviously, we have the first Black woman vice president, Kamala Harris. 31 Black women serve in Congress, the most ever. 30 are serving in the U.S. House of Representatives and 1 in the U.S. Senate. There have only been 3 Black women that have ever served in the U.S. Senate. I mean, that is a crazy statistic. Throughout the centuries that we've had Congress, and specifically the U.S. Senate, only 3 Black women have served, Kamala Harris being one of them. Black women are currently 4.3% of all state legislators compared to 2.3% in 1999. So that is an increase. But as we know, we still lack a lot of representation in important chambers of power. So we must keep that up. But I want to end with a quote from Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black woman to run for president. She was just an amazing force for civil rights and justice within our community. She said, quote, "At present, our country needs women's idealism and determination, perhaps more in politics than anywhere else." So let's see what Black women are going to do in November 2024. I'll continue to keep you updated and knowledgeable about this. I thank you all so much for supporting my dad and I on this channel, The Defiant Lawyers. We promise we're going to continue to bring you quality information and videos to defy this unjust legal system and nullify systemic racism. With that, I'm going to go, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.